Oh my days, this is so annoying.
I don't know what Discord's doing. Where's what? Oh, my mouse. Just my camera I'm looking at is there, but I have another one there, so you can see me. Let me make a TikTok. Let's try that one up there, so I can see. Actually, no, I'll just do it on this. This makes way more sense to me. I can read chat if needs be. That's for the last 2 days being shouted out on TikTok by people anyway, so it's fine. Did you find it in your settings?
Yeah, I found it, and it says it says allow, like it says that my camera access is on. Camera device settings? No.
Let me make a. Where's my YouTube on here? Why not have YouTube on my iPad? What's it done there?
Oh, I fear that my camera is just. I think maybe my camera is just completely dead. It won't access my
Dead.
camera app. Let me.
Dun dun dun.
Okay. Let me get my charger for my phone. I'll be right back. Just
No
in the other
problem.
room.
Slight delays, ladies and gentlemen, but no issue whatsoever. No issue whatsoever. Hold on a minute. Right, anyway. Close. Let me. How do I remove that? Because that was on mobile, that's why. I know I'm going to hit myself for a second. Viewers have booked my next live from my posted videos. I didn't know you could do that. Hold on. I'm going to assume you can't see my credit card on my desk when I do that. There's no way you're making that up. Good. W's. Camera shield. Oh, there we go. I can't fucking hear you though.
No.
Wait, I did. For a second there, I did.
You-
Speak.
You hear me?
I can hear you.
Mark?
I can hear you.
Okay.
It is working.
Brilliant.
W. Right, hold on. Right, so I mean, we planned like an hour and a half. This might run a bit over because technical difficulties and
Yeah.
whatnot. Right, I'm just going to make sure that your camera is in the right position on the stream. W's right. Let me move you up a little bit. Right, if I just do this and then.
Oh, why won't it twist? Twist. There we go. No?
That should be good.
Am I the wrong way?
I've just flipped you the other way on my thingy.
Okay, bro. Brilliant.
Because then it fits more into the screen. Right. I think everything's up and running. I put it on TikTok. The stream is going. Okay, now it's gone black. Wonderful. Oh, no, it's back. Never mind. Okay. Stream is going. We've booked about not 2 hours, an hour and 30 minutes so far for this. We might run a little bit over, which is perfectly fine. We have a few topics to discuss today. We are doing immigration. Well, that links into like party politics with culture in the way of it, and Ukraine, and then anything else that diverts from that as well will be discussed. Ali, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, my name is Ali. I don't know. I study politics and international relations. I am currently a member of the Labour Party, and I campaigned at the last election. And yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
Here I am.
I imagine that most people know exactly who I am if they're watching this. Everyone knows I'm a big nationalist. I am a right-wing nationalist. I advocate strongly for domestic production, domestic jobs, for a lack of foreign influence and involving ourselves in foreign events and activities, because I see that as a direct negative effect on the British people and the progression of this country. I have quite strong views on immigration. I have quite strong views on culture. I have quite strong views economically. So, I mean, what topic would you like to start? And I'll let you do the picking. I'll let you go first with what you wish to talk about.
I mean, I guess we'll talk about party politics first, because I feel like that is the broadest thing that maybe has the most up to date.
Sure. So what would you say your stance on party politics is then?
Well, as I said before, I'm a member of the Labour Party. My politics is of a democratic socialist. So obviously I am more to the left than the current Labour Party leadership. But I believe that the Labour Party is the best option available to Britain, and I believe that they have the best shot, the best ideas to really change this country. Although it's not my, preferred. It doesn't go as far as I want, but at my heart, I'm a Democrat and a pragmatist. So I believe that any progress towards fairness, equality should be championed, and I think that's the most pragmatic route is through the Labour Party.
And how do you think the Labour Party's managed to do that as of its last year in government?
It has been rough. I think that the political management from Keir Starmer is definitely lacking. I believe that he is a very competent man. He's a very smart man. I believe that he cares, but there is no message. There's a lack of drive, a reason, a purpose. I believe that it is there. I believe that they are doing the right things, but they're not telling a story. So I believe that we are definitely going in the right direction, but the political management definitely needs work.
I mean, would you say right direction when the economy is still declining? Would you say right direction when immigration is still exceeding uh, sustainable numbers, when illegal migration over the small boats is now at a 50% increase than it was this half of last year? Would you say that's successful, or would you say that we're just receding more backwards with the ignorance that we're being more socially accepting and loving of everybody with these liberal ideas?
I think, yeah, I think the economy is nowhere near in a good place at all. There's no getting around that. I think that the Conservatives left this country in an absolute shit place. I think that it's going to take a long time to recover from that. Nobody's perfect. I don't think that by the end of this parliament there's going to be a happy, sunny, amazing future. Um, I think that in terms of immigration numbers, they are extremely high. That's, that is a thing. Um, I think that the capitalization of it as an issue, especially by the likes of Reform UK, um, is deeply worrying and deeply racist, um, when used by the likes of Lee Anderson and Nigel Farage, because it is an issue. It is definitely an issue because we are an island. We only have so much space. Um, but the language coming from the likes of Reform UK, um, it others people and it divides us into people who were born here and people who aren't. When I think that anybody who contributes to this country, anybody who lives here, has a right to be here, has a say in how we run things and what we do.
Sure, but you're not saying that ignores that puts economic benefit and economic precedent at the forefront of what a integrated individual within this country means. Like for this chap to go, someone that benefits the country, sure, you can work a job, you can pay taxes into it, but if you don't willingly integrate because you put yourself in very segregated environments, you put yourself in environments where you don't respect the cultures of Western values or the cultures of a Christian nation, and you continue to follow the very backwards traditions of your own homeland, would you not say that that is actually a negative effect on what it is to be within Britain?
I would say no. I would say that for a long time, sectors of our economy have been completely reliant on people who come from all over the world, from mainland Europe, from our former colonies, from now the Commonwealth, the Windrush generation. They have brought so much, not only economic opportunity, but cultural enrichment to the country. I think, yes, there are pockets of people from different cultures or countries that tend to congregate around each other. But I think the reason that they do that is because sometimes people are hostile towards them. So they want to live close to people that they know. And I think that's completely fair enough because I want to live next to the people I know. But if I went to a completely new country, I'd also want to be around people that I'm vaguely familiar with.
Right, okay. So we'll go on to the whole idea about immigrants have held up the backbone of this country. I mean, that was mainly because of the decline that we had after the world wars and whatnot. We were involved heavily. We lost a lot of economic benefits. We lost our NHS was birthed after that. And these new systems of like social policy were very difficult to implement into a country like the UK that was on its arse after a very financially burdening war with a lot of death, a lot of issues regarding military equipment and the advantages we had to make technologically wise, and the expansions into Eastern Europe and all of this. So although immigration may have helped at this point in time, and I think we can all accept that a lot of people that came over with the genuine benefit that they wanted to help this country and look after this country and integrate into this country. But if you look at it modern day, I would say that people are not coming over for the benefit of this country. They're coming over for the benefit of themselves. I would say they come over because we offer them very good welfare. We offer them social security. We offer them housing. We offer them the access into the NHS, social services like schooling and whatnot. We offer them these much more advanced social sector regions that they come over and they take advantage of. But a lot of the time, these people don't want to integrate, be it the Asian communities, be it the South African communities, be it the North African communities, be it the Eastern European communities. A lot of people come over with the idea that although they are living on this land, they're going to pay their tax, but they're also still going to exist in their bubble of what their reality should be.
I mean, I'll be completely honest. I don't really see much of a problem with them living in bubbles. I think that our country has always been a melting pot of different peoples and different cultures. Um, when people come over to this country and they, like you said, that they want to benefit themselves, I think that's completely fine, because if I were going to move to a different country, I'd want to benefit myself. And I think that in benefiting themselves, they're to get a job that does benefit the rest of us, that generates tax income, that gives, I don't know, whatever that job may be, will likely interact with other people and serve other people. And in terms of, welfare and stuff that people who have come to this country are entitled to, we don't offer a lot compared to continental Europe. There are a lot of other countries that offer much more welfare entitlements and better quality public services than Britain does. So I think that when people come to this country, they are often fleeing war or genocide or I even economic hardship. I think that they should be able to come here and they should be able to make whatever they want out of it, because we as a country, historically as a nation, we went round globetrotting and stealing other people's land. I think we're a culture of um, stolen traditions. Um, so I think anybody has the right to come over and contribute to the creation of a new, better society.
But a new, better society that has an increase in violence. We've seen a steady increase in violence, especially since the 2000s, 2010s, and continuing by at least a 35% increase from the national statistics. Now, you say all of this about we went through the countries and we went through the globe and we stole identities and blah, 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 blah. I mean, number one, colonialism is a part of human history. Every single civilization at one point has been colonized or attacked by another one for the benefit of that original region. I mean, I made a TikTok going over the success of the British Empire. Now, I didn't say that I support genocide, as people try and make it out to be, but on the objectives of an empire, it's expanding your territory past your original borders and then exerting power, control, and influence over these new territories. Now, the British Empire has done that quite well, and it was very lovely to people at the end of it, allowing people into this country, allowing people from India, allowing people from Africa into this country to give them a chance at some form of reparations for the way that we had taken over their land, I guess you could say. But do you not see the direct negative effects that this level of people coming into this country with such vastly different cultures to what it is to be Western, that don't integrate, that don't get on with us, that don't want to be a part of our society? Because a lot of people that come over are quite arrogant in the way that they believe that their way is the best, and the West would do the same going into these countries. They would be quite arrogant, going, well, I'm Western, I live for how I live. But a lot of these people that come over, they don't like the liberal values that we have. For example, Muslims are the most conservative religious group out of everybody. They absolutely wipe the floor with every other religion. Even looking at gay marriage, for example, 60% of practicing Christians are okay with gay marriage, whereas it's like 15% of Muslims. We can go to the 2016 Channel 4 poll, where it was 59% of Muslims were against LGBT individuals, 29% of them wanted it to be illegal, 33% of them thought that the UK should have Sharia law in certain areas, with 18% of them thinking that it should be criminalized by death. Frankly, I don't think that really aligns with our values. I don't really think that's beneficial for us. Sure, you might get more economic output, but if you look at the economic output that people like to go on about, is it really helping the average day Joe or John or whoever? No. it helps the big businesses, because a lot of these people that come over, especially on the small boats, as much as people want to deny it, they're men quite vastly, by about 90% usually. So these people are coming over, they're getting very low skilled jobs, which directly benefit the big business, because you don't have to go and seek higher qualifications to do the jobs. They then can offshore accounts, or they can offload the work, or X, Y, and Z, which benefits them. And sure, they may be paying a bit more corporation tax or whatnot, VAT, into our system. How is that benefiting the average person when we have a job market that's so tight, where people are struggling to be able to get jobs, people are struggling to be able to afford their bills, being able to afford housing, being able to afford cars, X, Y, and Z? How is that benefiting us when this melting pot is now just beginning to boil us alive?
I think you definitely raise a really good point about, the scarcity of resources in this country, and especially the scarcity of economic opportunities. But I think that there is not and has never been the fault of people coming over to this country. I think it's the fault of 14 years, well, longer, of a lack of investment into public services, into providing, into stuff like the Sure Start program, helping people become parents and create a new generation of Britons, which I and you were a part of. I think it's very true that this economic opportunity also doesn't necessarily directly benefit, the average person. And that's why I also believe that we need stuff like a wealth tax. We need workers on boards. We need higher participation in our democracy and a high level of workplace democracy, to make sure that any economic opportunity and an increase in economic activity is benefited by all of us. We need to build more housing. We need to put more money into public services. We need to stop taxing work as much as we do and start taxing accumulated wealth more. It is very hard to do, but I think that those are the kind of principles that we should go by. I think on the case of cultural conservatism, it's very true that there are very extremely religious fundamentalists that come over here and wish to impart their ways onto us. But we are a democracy. We are a liberal democracy, and they are allowed to believe that. And let's be honest, they never will be the majority. There was a time not that long ago when a majority of people in this country did not support gay marriage. The leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, does not support gay marriage. There was a contest for the SNP leadership in 2023 in which one of the candidates did not support gay marriage. And they are, as much as I hate it, allowed to think that. They are allowed to think that. There are religious fundamentalists of all stripes and colours. I do not believe that religious fundamentalism is helpful towards the development of a society, but I believe in their right to believe that. And yes, they may want to impart their ways onto us, but that's why we maintain democratic control of our government, and we maintain, or we should increase the public oversight of policing, so that we know that the values of a liberal and democratic society are enforced.
Sure, but I mean, number one, we're not even a democratic society, let's be honest. We're a society that's owned by the big business and foreign interests because they pay direct lobbying. This is why everyone goes on about, oh, the Tories have done austerity, or Labour fucked up with the gold reserves, or X, Y, and Z. But if you actually look at it, the economy's been shrinking continuously, even since the 2008 financial crisis. It's been shrinking continuously because both parties deregulate, both parties put tax havens at the forefront. I mean, even Labour put forward a motion to limit party funding to £100,000 a year. And one of the clauses in that was to ban foreign funding into parties. But they withdrew that after pressure from people like Lord Ali. And if you look at the top donors for the parties, they all They all follow the same principles. So in Labour, you've got the Quadrita Capital Ltd. It's a Cayman Islands registered hedge fund that donate 4 million to Labour. You've got Gary Lubner, who's the CEO of Autoglass. You've got John Caldwell, who used to be a Tory supporter and then swapped his support to Labour. And he was publicly backing the party and its green/pension reforms. Now, why would these really rich people that can invest in green energy, they can put shares and stocks in these green businesses, why would they be willing to swap their support from one party to another out of nowhere? Why would they be willing to support a party that's willing to cut off things like the winter fuel allowance against pensioners? Because then it will force pensioners to have to work for longer, to be able to afford to live. You sit there and you can say that we have these party politics and you can blame this party or that party, but immigration is still at a record high. It doesn't matter the party. Our economic system is still failing. Doesn't matter whichever the party. We look at things like Brexit. It doesn't matter that it was Labour or the Conservatives. Both of them failed to put us forward with the deal that we wanted because they were sat there and prioritising their own interest, and most MPs wanted to remain. Most of their donors wanted to remain. So we can sit there and say that it's not going to lead to anything bad, and these people aren't going to be the majority. I mean, even in the last election, there were 5 members of parliament, all independents, that were elected on a pro-Gaza ticket. Gaza, yes, sure, a big contention within politics, but not a British issue. So if we're getting to the point where we now are gathering Sedarian politics, if we're getting to the point where people are now voting on the basis of what their religious fundamental values are, this doesn't turn out to be the original British values of free and fair democracy on the basis of individuality. It turns out to be democracy based on their own cultures, their own ways of being brought up. And we can say that they'll never be the majority. The birth rate of natural born, ethnically British people is on the decline, whereas birth rates of people from foreign nations with foreign cultures, of foreign religions, is on the increase, 3 to 1. So, I mean, the most popular name in the UK is now Mohammed. So you say they're not going to become the majority. We're already destined to be the minority by 2050. So if we're already seeing an increase in Sedarian politics now, what makes you say we're not going to see it come in the next 20 years where we have a parliament that's majority elected on their religious precedent?
I don't know what's going to happen in 20 or 30 years, but all we can decide on is what happens right now and what we have right in front of us. I think I completely agree with your take on corporate lobbying of politics. I think it's disgusting, and I think it's fundamentally wrong and harmful. But I think we do live in a democratic society because those people did not decide our votes. And I think that I don't know. It's just not that. I think that the issue of say, like, I remember in the last election that there was a lot of people who were supporting or within Reform UK talking about Sharia law and saying, I don't want Sharia law in this country. This is not what the vast majority of people want. Not Muslims, not Christians, not anyone, right? It is also true that the number of atheist people is increasing. People are no longer more and more identifying with a religion. So we're not only becoming a more religiously diverse country, but we're also becoming a more secular country. So as far as I believe, people can vote on their religious principles because I vote on my principles. They're not religious, but they're strongly held beliefs that I have had for most of my adult life and probably will have for more. I think that in defense of our liberal democratic values, we just have to, I think we just have to keep on keeping on. We have to keep challenging these views, but not shutting them down. And I don't think that the right thing to do is to punish these people who think that way, because there are always people on the wrong side of history, and we can't go around punishing them or banning them or banishing them.
It's not
Um,
a, yeah, sorry, Aaron.
no. That's pretty much it. That's
It's
all I
not
got.
about banishing them, but it's about assimilating. Like, if you're going to come to this country and your pure values are the fact that you believe in, and there's a difference between Muslims and Islamists. Let's make this different. And I'm not just honing down on them, and I'll get on to certain cultures that have come over and negatively impacted us before. But if your extreme values when you come over are the fact that, and I mean, I'm just going to quickly explain a little bit about Islam. So, the belief in Islam is the idea that Muhammad is the prophet. Muhammad was not God, he was a person. And the belief that if you follow his teachings, you can be like Muhammad. That's the issue. This is why people make the jest that when they suicide bombers, for example, shout Allahu Akbar before they die. It's God is greater. It's you are giving yourself as some form of like semi-prophet to God, and you are fulfilling some great conquest of your religious prophecy. Now, the issue is, as much as we can sit here and go, we're a liberal democracy, we're accepting these things. Liberalism has led to so many bad things happening on our own soil regarding the actual well-being and the living standards of our people. And as much as people want to deny that and they want to shout from the rooftops that that's offensive to say, it's completely true. Again, look at the crime statistic that I've brought over. It's a 35% increase in the last 20 years. That is ridiculous, with more homicides being reported every single year, more knife crime being reported every single year. Look at London. London is one of the biggest hot spots of cultural divisions, and it is absolutely out of control. It's disgusting. It is violent. It is not a nice place to live. It has an increase in sexual violence. It has an increase in physical violence. It has an increase in assault. And I mean, we can go over the cultural differences between people. I mean, you've got the Tower Hamlets in London where they have a large Bangladeshi population, where some wards where 70% of the population is of Bangladeshi origin, and there are multiple different cases reported there about self-segregation, parallel communities, and a lack of cultural integration with the wider British population. A 2016 Casey review commissioned by the UK government cited that Tower Hamlets was an example of worrying levels of segregation, particularly in school and housing. You've got things like Sparkbrook and Alum Rock in Birmingham, where the majority are Muslim areas with large South Asian populations. The issues are reports have raised concerns about segregated schooling, with many children attending schools where almost all students are of the same ethnicity or religious background, which hinders the cross-cultural understanding. The evidence, again, 2014 Trojan horse scandal, which brought attention to certain schools in Birmingham allegedly promoting hardline Islamic practices. But it was a long and contested issue. But the point is, it still exists in these indoctrinated settings. You've got Blackburn, Lancashire, where it was known for having neighbourhoods with almost entirely Asian and white populations living side by side, but separately. A 2007 report described some communities in Blackburn as being sleepwalking into segregation. Inter-ethnic interaction in certain areas was reported to be very low. Then you've got Luton, Bedfordshire. You've got a diverse town with significant South Asian and Eastern European populations. Much of Luton may function well, but it's been cited as having locations where fringe extremist groups, both Islamist and far right, have tried to exploit integrated gaps, which is the mutual mistrust between these groups being fled. So, I mean, you have all of these problems that may come from the economic benefit, all of these problems that may come from us being more liberally accepting as a society. But are we actually going in the right direction if we have all of these issues with segregated communities doing it to themselves? I mean, when I went to college, it was a very diverse college, but even the canteens were separated into whites, blacks, and Asians. And that was just the norm. Nobody put that precedent in place. That was just the norm of the college standard. Is that genuinely beneficial for us, or is that just hurting us? Is that just making us, as Keir Starmer said, an island of strangers?
I think that obviously that segregation and a lack of cultural, interaction. Obviously, that's a problem. What I think is not the solution is to blame these people, the communities who are coming over. I think that what is important to also realize is that we are as much to blame if we are not if we are not interacting with these people, that is equally as worrying as them not interacting with us. I think that all of those uh, examples you gave are all obviously really bad events, and they, like there's no sort of saying that these are a good thing to be a part of a liberal democratic society. But I think that bad things do happen, and we are here. And when they uh, when they come about, we challenge them, and we say that we talk about these things openly, and we talk about what we need to do wrong, and or what we have done wrong. I would ask what because you say that liberalism has done a lot of bad things. How would you, what kind of things are we talking here? Like, are you talking just about sort of our liberal immigration system, or?
Well, I think our liberal immigration system has been disastrous. I mean, liberalism, when I say it, it's this weird, nonchalant acceptance of just everything without any form of integration. I mean, the idea that people didn't even have to learn English before coming here is crazy, or integrating into that. We have no integration policy actually in place. And then when Keir Starmer turns around and says that people should talk English and blah, 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 now all of a sudden, that's an offensive thing to say. Nicely, you're in Great Britain. We're an English-speaking nation. That should just be the norm to speak English. It shouldn't be specifically a privilege to do. But the idea of blissful ignorance. All right, your camera's gone.
Yeah, I think I've got to charge my phone up, so I've gone back onto my laptop.
Okay, that's
so
fine.
No
we'll do that. We'll do that for now. Did you hear all that, or was the last thing you got up to?
Yeah, I can hear that.
Okay, good. So this idea of like blissful ignorance with liberalism, it's just, it leads us to these situations where we ignore the facts that are actually hurting us. Now, as much as we want to sit here and pretend like, oh, it's all fine, guys, we're a really accepting country and we've accepted all these people in, let's not be mistaken. A lot of the cultures that have been brought into this country have had negative effects. Even just one of the most obvious things, roadmen. Roadmen were not a British creation. They were they predominantly come from Jamaican and North African culture, especially Caribbean cultures that have high gang violence. This was imported to the country within the 1980s. Am I saying that every single person from these nations is going to involve in gang culture? No, but what I am saying is when you have a country like Jamaica that has one of the highest percentages of gang violence, of homicide rates in the entire world, and we integrate them into our country without making them assimilate. We let them move here; they don't assimilate, and you can say, "Oh yeah, but we grow, and people don't people learn, they don't follow their parents' footsteps." But I mean, if you look at it, most of the people that identify with this kind of gang mentality are second and third generation immigrants, and it's not only a race issue. I'm not making it a race issue. It is spread to the youth. You go out in the streets, you see all these people carrying blades. These people have their clothing sense and their gang idea of making an identity for themselves in the public street, because that's some form of dominance over people that makes them feel like they're doing something big and good. And I mean, there's many different reasons for this, and I can go through the actual statistics about modern gang violence and the increase in it, and I will, I'll let you respond first, but I will go over that in a minute. But that's just one example of a culture that's had a significantly negative effect on this nation, a significantly negative effect, and it's been blindly ignored in the idea of we're being liberally accepting, and we're not going to talk about these things because it's better to ignore it, guys, and be so nice to everybody whilst our kids are fighting each other with knives on the street. And I mean, people can say it doesn't happen. I literally recorded a kid being arrested with a knife last Saturday. Our kids are dying on the street. People are being assaulted at record highs. People are being killed at record highs. To me, that's not a safe country. To me, I'm not blaming the people that have come over. I'm blaming the people at the top that have allowed these people over, that have allowed these cultures over, that have not put forward integration policy with the benefit of going, well, it's economically beneficial for us. We're being liberal, guys, because we're making nice progress with our GDP, even though we're not.
Yeah, so I think that having integration policies learning English if you want to come here. I don't think that is a massive point of contention. I fear that is, that has kind of consensus support, because there's nothing wrong with coming over here if you want to speak. If you speak a different language, that's completely fine. But I think it does pose a problem if you completely can't communicate in English. I do think that I think it is quite problematic to link these current problems that we have with specific cultures and specific waves of immigration, because these issues that we have, such as gang violence, such as knife crime, these should be treated as individual issues, and they are issues which stem from lots of different factors, from class, from region. So yes, we can. I don't really see any problem with having some sort of an integration policy with people who move here, but it won't solve crime. It won't solve economic hardship, and these issues that we face with crime, they are often motivated by economic factors, and immigration reform. Closing off immigration is not the route, I think, to address the level of crime in our country or address the level of inequality. It simply isn't the best route to do that as well, as a people, as a society, or as a government, I do believe. One thing, what was I going to say after that? Should we move on to Ukraine in a second?
Yeah, we can do that. I've got a few things I'm going to talk about before we do.
No, go
ahead. I mean, as much as you want to say that it's wrong rhetoric to label it to the groups, I mean, let me go over this. So we started importing a lot of people from the Caribbeans and North Africa within the 1980s. And within the 80s, it was the birth of modern urban gangs. So its major rise began in the 1980s, especially in London, Manchester, and Birmingham. The contributing factors were second-generation migrants facing racism, unemployment, and marginalisation, which is exactly what you were saying. And now I agree with that. But that's going to happen when we have a system that doesn't have any form of integration policy and it just shoves people in an ethnic group. I mean, people argue all the time, well, the Brits just shoved a bunch of Jews who are in Palestine, expected the Jews and Arabs to get on. I mean, it's an ethnical division that exists, and as much as we want to ignore that in Western society, that still existed. So it was the emergence of yardie gangs, which were linked to Jamaican organised crime, particularly in London and Birmingham. It was the rise of heroin and crack cocaine markets, leading to turf wars and street violence. It was the late 1980s with the rise of gun crimes in areas like Tottenham and Brixton. And then in the 1990s and 2000s, you had peak in gang-related gun and knife crime, with violent crime surged in the inner city areas. Manchester was known as Gunchester, if you didn't know that, due to shootings in Moss Side, which were all predominantly of immigrant heritage. And then London gangs like the Peckham Boys, Tottenham Mandem, DSS, and Murder Dem Pussies, MDP, emerged, which were all linked to drug trafficking networks, access to illegal firearms, and retaliatory violence and postcode wars. Now, again, a lot of these things are issues to opening our borders to foreign influence, with things like the drugs and guns being able to come directly across our borders and into our major cities, because we became this boiling pot of free travel and free trade, and we wanted to be the big financial burden of the world. But it led to all of these disasters. So I go back to my original point, and this is why I'm such a strong nationalist, is opening our borders and putting us on this weird globalist stage to try and benefit us economically for the power of being a part of these big things like the World Economic Forum or the EU or X, Y, and Z, has led directly to negative effects of the actual British people that have been here for hundreds of years. It has led to an increase in violence. It has led to divisions within our society. It has led to sectarian politics. It has led to religious tensions. It has led to cultural tensions. And it's not a race issue because there are multiple people that come to this country that integrate. I have Indian family, I have black family, they've all integrated perfectly. They have never once said anything that may make me raise an eyebrow about their loyalty to Britain, because frankly, they love it here, they love the people, they love the culture. But when you have these people that bring over these problems, they don't integrate. They live by the way that they have been brought up to live and the way that their families continue to bring them up to live because of the lack of integration. That is a direct negative impact within the country, and politicians turn a blind eye to it because it's benefiting their economic standpoint, and they get lobbyists that pay them thousands of pounds, and then the lobbyists get lordships and stuff like that. It is directly hurting us, and people throw racism at that, and Reform's very weak on immigration. If you actually read Reform's immigration stance, they want 100,000 net migrants a year. They want to increase things like the Britannia card, which directly benefits foreign business than it does UK citizens. We turn a blind eye to it because, frankly, we get gaslit into thinking that it's not a problem when it is a problem. You can see it with your own eyes. You can go to these areas that are so segregated within their own little communities, and that nothing gets done. There's shit overflowing the bins. Everywhere is shut down, or it's just money laundering schemes or any of this. It's not healthy. It's not good for us. It's not benefiting us. It's hurting us. It's killing our people. And frankly, it's disgusting.
Okay, so I think what I want to reiterate from my point of view is really just that I just really cannot see that how we jump into this conclusion that opening our borders, which we've never had that much of a liberal immigration system. We do have a lot of restrictions. The net migration is very high, and this is not because of our stance on, because we offer out so many visas. Open borders do not correlate with crime and disorder. They don't, because there are a lot of countries which have much greater freedoms. Think of the Schengen area. There's lots and lots of people who move around through continental Europe, and from outside of continental Europe, they move around borders, and it isn't as much of a problem. You talk about those gangs at the start, and you say that that the rise of these urban gangs in the 80s is in response to racism and segregation that these people have experienced. But I think that we all have a responsibility to address these things. It is just as much our responsibility as people who were born in Britain to address those issues of segregation and racism as it is to the people who are coming over and assimilating into our culture, which I think really is, I find it kind of a weak argument, because I feel that you can assimilate into our culture, but like very weakly. I am a British person. I'm a British citizen. Do I have particular loyalty to Britain? It's the country that I live in, and I do not wish the people here harm, but I do not wish anyone harm. So, I feel that the problems that you raise, we all have as much of a responsibility to address. And you are completely right that the politicians have ignored this issue, right? And it does need to be talked about. Just as every issue needs to be talked about, because if we swipe things under the rug, like you were talking about earlier, the financial crisis in 2008, nobody wanted to talk about how deregulation of the market and the financial sector would have a greater long-term effect, and look what happened. We can't sweep these issues under a rug. But the fact is that in modern Western democracies, people are talking about it. It's kind of the top issue on everyone's mind. It's what's driving the rise of these far-right parties in the UK, France, Germany, Sweden, Finland, France. Oh, I already said France. Anyway, and the violence and disorder that is happening in said countries, I have only seen been caused by angry white racists. The last nationwide or akin to nationwide riots we had was in the summer of 2024, and that was by white racist thugs and far-right fucking crazies who took the brutal murder of small children and used it to exert violence and destroy property. I don't see that these issues of disorder are directly linked to immigration. We can have a conversation about the fact that, you know, statistically, these things may be true. Grooming gangs has been in the mainstream, you know, political discourse for about 15 years now. I mean, it is a factual truth that a lot of the people who are arrested are from similar communities of particularly Pakistani men. I think that the correlations that are drawn from that are often sort of self-asserting, self-assuring. What am I trying to get at? Like people confirming their own beliefs. I think that we can have a discussion about these things, and obviously that's what we're doing. But to come to the conclusion that we should completely cut off immigration and that will solve our problems, I don't think is right, because I think every single country in this world has a mix of different cultures and religions and different ethnicities. So if you know, this is potentially a problem, it never will be solved. So therefore, do we not need to create modern solutions to that and work around that and work towards a society in which we can all cohabit together?
Right, I'm going to respond, then you can respond, and then we'll do closing statements on this section, and then we'll move on to Ukraine, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to say to that is, you say about people not committing crimes from an immigrant background. I mean, number one, those gangs, the Yardi gangs, whatnot, was a direct second immigration generation, a third immigration generation. It was a direct culture imported from Jamaica, the Caribbeans, North Africa. It was directly from those regions. You can't deny that, because frankly, they didn't exist within the UK before that. Sure, we may have had the Peaky Blinders, but the Peaky Blinders was nothing more than owning certain parts of territory within places like Birmingham. But then even Lee Rigby, remember Lee Rigby, 2013, he was killed by two Muslim men that did it in defense of the treatment of Muslims throughout the world. If that does not directly say there are people within our own country, within our own land, that are committing atrocities on the basis that they are sticking to their religious or cultural backgrounds, and that they see us as the enemy, they see the British public as the enemy, I don't know what will. I mean, even the 7/7 attacks were people living among us, within our society, part of us, that still committed a terrorist attack, not a tragic accident, as King Charles wants to make it out to be, but a terrorist attack, because they had nothing more than a deep hatred for what it was to be English, to be British, to be Western, all of these things. So when we have a system that completely retracts this form of integration, this form of assimilation, when we have these people that are so angry with the soil they're living on, when we have a complete lack of love for this country, no nationalism whatsoever, and then we're surprised when people commit these terrorist attacks. We're surprised when people like Lee Rigby get beheaded in the street of London. We're surprised when they start rioting in Leeds over police brutality because somebody was lawfully arrested. We're surprised when they start rioting over the fact that two men who assaulted police officers within Manchester Airport broke a female police officer's nose, and then people are protesting, oh, it's racism, it's this weird system where we're so oppressed and all of this, which simply isn't true. That doesn't exist. I think, frankly, that's ignoring the issue. I think, frankly, by saying that it's the far right and all of this is a lie. We don't even have far-right parties in the UK that are mainstream. I mean, I guess the farthest right party we've got is probably the BNP, but they're nowhere near mainstream. Reform is not a far-right party. It's a centre-right party, if that. I think to ignore the actual reasons and the actual facts behind it, to ignore the actual cultural divide, is to do nothing more than turn a blind eye to it. We're going to see more people in this country die. We're going to see a higher homicide rate. We're going to see continued segregation in our communities. We're going to see a continued cultural divide, continued religious divide. This is not helping us. It's not beneficial. It's killing us, frankly. We're not getting on. We're getting worse. Our communities are turning into shitholes. Our relations are turning sour. This is a bad, bad problem. The UK seriously needs a strong nationalist point of view regarding immigration. Look at Poland, for example. Poland cut off its immigrational imports, and now it is one of the safest countries in the entirety of Europe because it enforces very strong cultural policy, enforces very strong religious policy, being Christianity. Poland is a very nice country now. It may have some backwards views socially, but on a statistical basis of looking after the well-being of the people of that country, it's very, very high compared to where we are, or where France is, or where Sweden, or where Germany, or where Italy is.
Yes. Okay. So I don't even know where to start. Okay. So I think that obviously, like the examples that you give about the specific incidents or generalized trends in gang violence. Obviously, I'm not specifically disputing that, but I would definitely repute that the nature of this violence is. I mean, I just sound like a broken clock, but it is not. It is not from their culture. The cultures of Southeast Asia, of North Africa, of West Africa, of wherever people come from, these are not cultures of violence. These are not there are not nations of people devoted to destruction and violence, right? These are people who are devoted to destruction and violence, just as there are white people devoted to destruction and violence. This is not just a cultural issue. It is not just an immigration issue. Like I said, the riots that we saw last year in the summer were also predicated by people who believed on their religious or national identity, believed that they had identified an enemy and they were set to harm and destroy to get their goals. So it happens we can see in history and around the world and in this country, we see violence and disorder from every part of the population. So what we need to address is not culture or immigration. It is the root causes of this violence. We need to think about, why do people commit crime? We need to police this crime rather than try to trace it back culturally or nationally. And I think obviously I don't disagree that a lack of national identity is a problem. If we think about wars that countries have fought, you think about the Second World War, what got us through was a sense that we as a people were under attack, which obviously we were. But, I would say that my nationalism, my pride in this country is that we are a liberal democratic society. We are open to change. We have we are a values based people, and I believe that at our heart we are the people of this country are empathetic to not just each other but to people around the world. And I think that an atomization, people withdrawing into their own communities and segregating themselves is a problem. But I think that is a society-wide problem. I think we do need to have some sort of coherence, some community, and I think that when we did those, we had goals to work towards, goals of, I don't know, of democracy, of equality, of fairness, of justice. And I think that we do need to regain that spirit, but I think that we do that through the promotion of democratic values and the defense of democracy, no matter race, religion, or national identity, and national what's the word? Origin, country of origin.
Right. Thank you for that. Right. I'm going to do my closing statement. I'll let you do yours, just summing up my point of view and my opinions regarding the subject, and then we can move on to Ukraine if that's fine with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my closing statement. Well, Britain's very divided. We've got a lot of problems. We've got a lot of cultures. We've got a lot of people hating one another. We've got a lot of religious tensions. We don't have a lot of integration. We don't have a lot of love for each other anymore. We don't have a lot of community. We don't have a lot of nationalism. We have populations within society that don't want to integrate with their neighbor. They don't want anything to do with us. They want to sit in their own Siderian communities with their shit-filled streets and violent gang wars on their doorstep rather than understand what it is to integrate within our society. They look down on people that are openly Christian. They look down on people that respect British values. I mean, you get slated nowadays for saying that you're a nationalist. People instantly go, oh, so you're a racist. No, I just love my country. I think we are heading in a very, very bad direction. It doesn't matter who you vote. You can vote Labour. You can vote the Tories. You can vote Reform. They will still let in tens of thousands of people into this country undocumented and unlooked after. So they will continue to spread within our country. They will continue to have their own divisions, and it will continue to harm us because we are not getting on. The UK is going backwards. We are not looking after our people. We are putting the benefits of the economy above the welfare of this society. We are killing each other. We are hurting each other. We're going to continue to see people like Lee Rigby being attacked in a religious sense. We're going to continue to see riots like the Southwark riots to happen as people feel like they are being unheard and lied to by the British government. I mean, even just look at the fact that they hid the man's race and whatnot for a very long amount of time, and it turns out that he was of migrant descent. The issue is the UK likes to play this weird fallacy and liberal idea that we don't have to deal with it, guys. It will sort itself out. Guess what? No, it won't. It won't. It's not going to. We're going to continue down this path of self-destruction. I think it's a vastly dangerous thing to do. I think liberalism is having a severely negative effect on the United Kingdom. We are hurting each other. We need to cut immigration completely. We need a negative net migration policy. We need to focus on the people of Britain, and we need to prioritise Britain. Whenever you're ready.
That was what a closing speech. Did you prepare that? Was that off the cuff?
No, I did that off the cuff actually.
Oh, okay.
I know. What can I say? Okay. It's my destiny to be a public speaker, I guess.
Okay. Okay. My closing argument. I would say we are very divided as a country, as a nation. We are very divided politically. But I think that we do not address this problem by othering certain communities and treating them as a threat. I believe that if we treat cultures and people as a threat, they will feel threatened, as we would, as anybody would. The issues that are present within this country are systemic. They are not the fault of immigrants. They are not the fault of people here. I think a lot of it is mismanagement. I think a lot of it is potentially global. But what do? We try to fix it. We band together. We defend collective action. We defend our democracy. If we are ever under attack, we would expect our neighbours and our friends and our family to defend us. So I believe that the people who live next door or you encounter working in hospitals or shops or in government or wherever they may be from, if they live in this country and they want to stay, I say we do let them stay. Obviously, numbers are things that can be debated and can be spun, but I think the principle that anybody may come to this country if they want to contribute and they want to enjoy our freedom and promote democracy, I think they should be allowed. And I think that society is better for a cultural, religious, and economically diverse society.
Is that the end of your statement?
Yes, that has been my statement.
Wonderful. Right, we're going to go on to Ukraine. Now, Ali and I have very different opinions regarding Ukraine because you started the last one of your opening. I'm going to lay down my point of view about Ukraine first and foremost. So my contention with Ukraine and the issue is everybody likes to sit here and they like to blame Putin. They like to say, oh, Putin's this evil man that wants to rebuild the Soviet Union and blah, 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 blah. I don't see that as the actual case. I see NATO and Western precedent into Eastern Europe as the main issue that is causing these wars. I see the overthrowing of the 2014 government in Ukraine, a Western coup, as one of the main issues that has led to this conflict. I see the continuous advancement of Zelensky demanding more and more money, demanding more and more power, demanding Crimea back, demanding the Donbass back, demanding his joining of NATO as the main issues that have led to this war carrying on and this conflict expanding now to the death of over 1 million Ukrainians. I think we as the West play this very weird mind game where we think that we are the sole bearers of democracy, we're the sole bearers of what is morally correct. In reality, we're not. We're a collection of nations that have lied continuously. We're a collection of nations that have tried to impose our values, our liberties on other democratically affected countries. We are a continent of people that exert military force over these countries because, frankly, we bully people into submission.
That's what I think the key problem is in this war, and I think in foreign policy with Russia, that is the key problem, is bullying. Putin is a bully on a mass murdering spree. Threatening a sovereign nation such as Ukraine, invading a sovereign nation such as Ukraine cannot be allowed. Not just for the security of Ukraine, but for the security of Europe. Russia invading Ukraine has been obviously a disaster for the Ukrainian people, but it has also been a disaster for the Russian people. Putin is a murderous dictator who has no regard for his own population, let alone the population of the rest of Europe. If we allow Ukraine to be swallowed up by such a dictator, then this puts at risk other sovereign democratic nations. I think that sovereignty is something. Sovereignty and the right to self-determination have been the key issues around most wars, really. But letting large powers roll over and bully smaller ones is what led us into World War One. It's what led us into World War Two. It's what led us into the biggest disasters in human history. Obviously, prolonging a war is going to create casualties. And these casualties, these death numbers, are not expendable. But we just fundamentally cannot let Ukraine be rolled over, because it sets a precedent. Because what happens when we let Ukraine roll over and China gets big with Taiwan? What happens then? What happens when India gets big with Pakistan? We cannot let, and that is also obviously why I believe that we need to listen to our own talk around Ukraine in regards to Israel. We need to have a coherent foreign policy that we apply all across the world. NATO supporting Ukraine is not just in its own interest, but it is in the interest of people around the world who want to defend their sovereignty and their right to self-determination.
Right, thank you for that. So I would say, the original reason for NATO's formation was to prevent against Stalin's control over Eastern Europe. Now, we do know that in 1991 is when the Soviet Union collapsed, which Putin himself has famously described it as a geopolitical catastrophe. Let's remember as well, it was only an accident of how Lenin organized the Soviet Union administratively that Ukraine even had any kind of autonomy and any kind of nationhood at all. So when we have this massive defense organization that's created for the sole purpose of preventing a Soviet Union control over Eastern Europe, and it promised not to expand past Eastern Germany, but we know it lied in that. In 1999, it expanded into Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary. 2004, it went to the Baltic states, Slovenia, and others. 2009, it went to Albania, Croatia. And 2008, NATO even expressed support for Ukraine and Georgia joining its organization. Let's make it clear. Russia has always viewed Ukraine joining NATO as an existential threat and made this very clear in a 2008 Budapest summit. So when we have this massive defense alliance, which, by the way, is 10 times stronger than Russia, as much as people want to deny it, when we have this massive defense alliance and people like Kamala Harris, when she was vice president, going to Kiev and saying that Ukraine will join NATO 4 days before the invasion started, we really expect Putin not to sit there and be, hold on a minute, this is a danger to us. Also, can we make it of note that things like Taiwan or Pakistan, bearing in mind, if the people of that region want to be part of the country, like the Donbass do, the separatist groups in the Donbass do, like Crimea wants to be part of Russia, who are we as the West to determine whether or not that democracy should be ignored? Just because it doesn't fall in line with our democracy, how does it mean that their democracy is invalidated?
So I would say about the promises to not expand past Eastern Germany, I do think it is valid to say that promises made to the USSR to not expand past Eastern Germany, which was largely adhered to, are no longer valid after the dissolution of the USSR. And NATO was created to defend Western Europe against a larger power, the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, that threat did not go away. That threat of invasion and of sovereignty did not go away. It is okay. I'd say since World War II, we have set up international organizations which seek to promote diplomacy and seek to resolve disagreements on fair means without war. You are right that if people of certain regions, if they want to vote to join another country, such as if Scotland had voted in 2014 to become its own country, it has every right to do that. But it is not just that, we're saying that the annexation of Crimea or the Donbass regions, that is a security threat to us. It's that the people of the Donbass and Crimea did not vote for this. In 2014, Russia invaded Crimea. In 2022, Russia invaded the Donbass. These elections that were held, these referenda, were not free and fair. We cannot, if as much as people have the right to vote to join another country, a nation has the right to want to defend itself, and Ukraine wants to defend itself. I think that we, as another sovereign nation, with empathy, that if we were invaded, we would want others to come to our aid. We should come to the aid of Ukraine against Russia, because it is not Ukraine who are marching into towns unprovoked, forcing them to join their government, their nation, and then repressing them, and then forcing them to speak their own language, then to completely try to dismantle any sort of culture. That is Russia. So Ukraine's sovereignty is something that should be defended, because yes, Putin did see the expansion of NATO as an existential threat. That should not then dictate equally what we should do, because the countries who joined NATO wanted to join NATO. They voted to join NATO. If Ukraine wants democratically to join NATO, it should be allowed to. Yes, that may be a threat to Putin, but we shouldn't roll back on our freedoms and our commitment to freedom just because some crackpot dictator wants the opposite.
So I'm going to respond. I'm going to start with you went on about the fall of the Soviet Union, which meant that NATO itself lost its original precedent of being a defense organization against the Soviet Union. But I ask you, why, after the fall of the Soviet Union, after the Russian population was halved, after the decimation of the Russian military, after the decimation of the Russian Empire, why did NATO, a defense alliance that was formed primarily as a countermeasure to the USSR, not dismantle? Why did it then express in 1998 its want to expand? And then it did expand, into Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary. If this defense organization was only sitting there for its original ideals, its original goals, why did it not disband? Why did it continue with its aggression? Why did it then start bombing things like Yugoslavia? Why did it then get involved in Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya? Why has it then spent the last of these years involving itself in any conflict that it can see and calling it a defense operation? It's not a defense operation when you're bombing the hell out of Christians in Yugoslavia, going, oh, well, we're stopping ethnic cleansing of Yugoslavians. From who? Other Yugoslavians. So you're killing a set of people that you don't agree with within a society, and they have their own cultural tensions and their own diplomatic wars and whatnot. So does NATO actually see itself as a defense organization, or does it see itself as some militant bully within the world? Are we really surprised that Russia put its foot down when we now flout NATO allowing Ukraine to join after Russia drew a red line in the sand and went, no, that's not happening after 2008. Yet now we flout it, we keep flaunting it, we keep sending them our own artillery. We had been doing it beforehand. Is that really the original pact of preventing the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact that they made? Or is that nothing more than this weird globalist militant bully that's trying to dominate what should and should not be controlled? It's not really the right of Ukraine, which, bearing in mind, we all are very aware that Putin has never fully seen as a sovereign nation. It's always seen it as a part of Russia that was let go by a vastly huge mistake from Lenin. So are we really surprised when we start adding the idea that Ukraine is going to be allowed in? Are we really surprised that when the West puts a coup within the Ukrainian government in 2014 in the Maidan Revolution to overthrow the very pro-Russian government that was there at that time with a pro-European government, a pro-NATO government? Are we really surprised that when we have things like Crimea being annexed, which, bearing in mind, has always wanted to be part of Russia, always has remained within the Federation of Russia, when things like Crimea get separated and annexed from Ukraine, are we really surprised when these things are happening? Is that really just Russia's fault? Or is this nothing more than Western politics being ignorant to the fact that we are bullies, we are nothing more than economic globalists that are trying to dominate the world stage because we already have more military power than most other nations?
You are completely right. NATO has completely changed from its original founding and its original purpose. It has now become an organization of like-minded democratic states who are willing to defend each other and defend each other's freedom and sovereignty and democracy. And that is to whoever may want to encroach on it. We should have, I think, a values-based foreign policy, right? A foreign policy based in the promotion of democracy, a promotion of a peace-minded, humanist democracy. We, as NATO, did not start this war. We may have provoked, in Putin's mind, him into starting it, but we did not enter sovereign territory and claim it as our own. We did not do that. That was Russia. Ukraine wants to defend itself. The Ukrainian people want to defend themselves, and they have a right to do so. So we, with a nation with a values-based foreign policy, we want to support them, so why shouldn't we? There is a broad consensus in British politics that we should be supporting the Ukrainians. What was it? A More in Common poll in March 2025 of this year had support for Ukraine and the Ukrainian cause at 79%, I think, and that's among Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat, Reform. It's cross-party support. We, as a democratic country, want to support Ukraine. Ukraine, as a democratic country, wants to support its own sovereignty. Others, like Poland, Germany, France, they also want to contribute, so they should be allowed to. This is a group of democratic nations, of democratic societies who are deciding they want to support Ukraine in its fight for freedom. So I do not see why they should not do that. Yes, Putin feels threatened, but quite frankly, I don't think we should care, because we should feel threatened. Russia has launched missions, and Putin has launched missions and assassination attempts on British soil. I don't know how you say his name. Litvinenko? Is that no? Anyway, something in 2008. The Salisbury poisonings. Recently, a group of men working on behalf of the Wagner Group were arrested for setting fire to a warehouse in London which contained supplies that were bound for Ukraine. Russia is not afraid to encroach on the safety of other nations. We should not believe that if Putin can just have half of Ukraine, then he'll just stop there, because that's what they thought in 2014 with Crimea. We should be defending democracy against autocracy. I think that's the key contention of foreign policy at this time, post the end of the Cold War. It's no longer capitalism v communism, it's democracy versus autocracy. And I quite enjoy my freedoms. I quite enjoy living in a liberal democracy, and I have complete and utter empathy for the Ukrainian people and their desire for a liberal democratic nation. And they are fighting a war of survival, because if Ukraine stops fighting, there is no Ukraine. If Russia stops fighting, there is no war.
So, right, number one, I'm just going to address the support for Ukraine argument. Now, let's remember, a lot of Western people fall into this mindset that NATO is this big, wonderful thing that's helping us and it's defending us from the evils of the world. Now, I find it awfully amusing that for 22 years between the fall of the Soviet Union and the Maidan Revolution in 2014, there was no crisis in Ukraine. There was no war. There was no invasion. There was not hundreds of thousands of troops at the border. The status quo, which we have, was that Ukraine was a neutral buffer zone, meaning there is peace. And that all changed again when we go into the 2014 coup. It changes when the prospect of Ukraine joining NATO became a real and distinct possibility. Again, 6 years of NATO ignoring Russia's security concerns, that the crisis begins and Russia invades Crimea and begins fueling the separatists in the Donbass. And it's at this point that NATO and the West begin a full-scale demonization campaign against Russia. It's this idea that, Russia is this big bad thing that's going to dominate the entire world and they're going to take over. Because think about it. I mean, you've just said there that you like your freedoms and that Russia's the threat and blah, blah, blah. When has Russia actually threatened us? Since this conflict began, since the 2014 Maidan Revolution, when has Russia ever directly threatened us? If anything is a threat, it's the West. If anything has been in the Middle East, bombing the hell out of them, killing off regimes, regime change constantly, then ends up with a more extremist regime, it's the West. If anyone has been in places like Libya, if anyone's been in Yugoslavia, if anyone's been in Asia, it's us. So I'm not really sure where we get this idea that it's Russia that is the enemy, when they hadn't done anything since the fall of the Soviet Union up until the Maidan Revolution. I don't really understand where we get this idea that Russia is the big bad dog when they've always been the one that's just kind of stuck to themselves. Am I saying that Russia is perfectly democratic? Am I saying that Putin is a nice man? No, I'm not. But what I am saying is that the sovereignty of their country to them is just important as the sovereignty to our countries. And when places like NATO are bombing the hell out of what we see as bad in the Middle East, or we see as bad in Africa or whatever, who are we to sit there and say that we're not the threat, guys? It's Russia that's the threat, even though they've done nothing until we put forward a coup into their territory. It's nothing until in September of 2020, the United States flying B-52 bombers across the edge of the Crimean Peninsula and near the Donbass, which is quite provocative, if you ask me. It's nuclear capable bombers. In June of 2021, 6 months later, the United Kingdom, sails a British destroyer, the HMS Defender, into the disputed Black Sea waters, where it was chased out by Russia. And then in November 10th, 2021, Ukraine and the US signed the Charter on Strategic Partnership, which is an updated document from 2008, where Washington says that it supports Ukraine's, quote, aspirations to join NATO, end quote. And then October 26, 2021, Ukraine begins using Turkish Bayraktar drones in the Donbass, which decisively, of course, turned the tide of the 2020 Karabakh war. And of course, they purchased these Turkish drones from Turkey, which is a NATO country. And that's the rearmament of Ukraine. So when we say that Russia is the big bad dog, Russia is the one that we need to fear, Russia is the one invading our sovereignty, Russia is the one that threats our freedom. Is it really Russia, or is it the West? Is it NATO that continues to commit regime change, that continues to bomb countries that we don't like? Is it NATO that continues to fuel these countries with our equipment, our technology to help try and turn the fight of their wars, when all Russia's actually done is it fueled the separatists in the Donbass, it fueled the Crimea annexation. But apart from that, what has Russia ever actually done within the last 22 years, up until the 2014 revolution? Nothing. Who has done the regime change? Who has done the expansion and the invasions? NATO, the West. So when we sit here and we make this demonized provocation of Russia about Russia is the scary one. Is it? Because if you go off the fact, if you go off what's actually happening, I wouldn't say Russia's the scary one.
So, okay, so why? I completely take your point, right? NATO has never been a perfect organization, right? The actions that we took in Iraq, in Afghanistan in the early 2000s were abhorrent. I think our continued support for nations like Israel, military support, I think, is not adherent to our values-based foreign policy. In this situation, in the Ukraine war, Russia is the enemy. Russia is the one who initiated an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. So, a wider debate about Western nations like the US and the UK and their involvement in military operations around the world, completely, yeah, I think there is a lot of wrongs to answer for. In this situation, us giving our equipment, our military expertise, our intelligence, these are all of our own volition. Like I said, the countries that have chosen to support Ukraine are doing so of their own volition. And the Article 5 of NATO has only been triggered once, obviously, by America in the invasion of Afghanistan. But not every country joined in that operation because they chose not to. That's what I think is the best part of NATO, is because it is a voluntary group of democratic nations who get to decide where they get involved and what they do and how much they contribute. So, in this war, since 2022, Russia is the enemy. Russia is the threat. And like I said, of the examples that I gave of Putin's Russia launching assassinations on British soil, especially the Salisbury poisonings, because that was using a nerve agent, and the way that it was used in a perfume bottle, it was so haphazard. It very easily, if that bottle was tossed, it was put in a bin, or that bin was wherever. If someone else picked it up and used it, that could have been a huge disaster. And there was no care by Russia of any activities or any sort of collateral damage of that attack. They didn't care. Russia assassinated a British citizen. That is a threat. They will continue to do this. They have made no indication that they would stop doing such a thing. In this war, Russia is the enemy. The support we have given of our own volition. The British people support it. the people of Poland, of France, of Germany, of Spain, they support it. So why should they not be allowed to give this support? Because we, as a country, as a people, we see ourselves, I guess, in the Ukrainian people of a nation under attack. And we want to support them. We want to take in refugees. We want to house them in our homes and give them refuge. Why should we not do that?
Right. So, I mean, you go on about Russia assassinating people in Salisbury. Now, sure, we can demonize Russia for an activity that they've committed on foreign soil. But again, this is what I'm saying about regime change, about revolutions being started, like the 2014 Maidan Revolution. The West does the exact same thing. The Iranian leader last year falling down in a helicopter crash could have landed anywhere, could have landed on a civilian neighborhood, murdering tens of people. But it luckily didn't, just like the perfume luckily didn't kill more than the intended target. But these kind of things in this situation where you have the West that demonizes one section of the world, be it China and Russia, as the enemy, as evil, this is not foreign policy that's going to benefit us. And this is why I, as a nationalist, say we should not be involved in these wars, because what do we actually get from benefiting ourselves in a Ukrainian war? Well, we get 1 million Ukrainians dead, and everyone's like, guys, it's fine, we're protecting democracy. I mean, at some point, you kind of got to sit there and go, is 1 million people dead actually worth trying to keep these two regions of land, or are we simply sacrificing them? Because to sacrifice them is to ignore the fact that, hey, it's not our people. We're doing it for democracy, guys. We are the West. I think that's a bit egotistical. And I mean, again, we go on about Russia being the bad guys, being the enemies, but I mean, a nuclear Ukraine antagonized by the British Navy and the Black Sea, by the American Air Forces over Crimea and the Donbass, once again, unfazed NATO expansion into Ukraine. And I would point out as well, for anybody that likes to say that Russia is some kind of Revenkrai state that wants to rebuild the Soviet Union, it never has. It's never had any ambition to do such. It's never, since the revolution, it never, ever tried to do it. It was NATO that was formed explicitly for the protection against the Soviet Union. Doesn't exist anymore. So the idea of NATO is nothing more than a bully. And to counter Russia's power with this big defense alliance, bearing in mind NATO spending in military exceeds $1 trillion, where in 2021 alone, whereas compared to Russia, which only spent about $67 billion on its military, they say that Russia is this Revenkrai because it expanded allegedly into Crimea, Donbass, Alkais, and South Ossetia. But NATO has expanded into 13 additional countries. They talk about Russian aggression when NATO has done far more military intervention in this last century in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and elsewhere across Africa and the Middle East, whereas Russia has had minor engagement in stuff like the Syrian civil war. So again, I go back to the point, we can sit on this NATO narrative that Russia is the enemy, Russia does this bad thing, Russia doesn't care about us, but we're going to continue to make an enemy with Russia and this section of the world. The more that we antagonize these wars, the more that we send over more and more military equipment into these wars, the more people that we get killed in these wars, the more that we overthrow democratically elected regimes like the 2014 Maidan Revolution, the more that we involve ourselves with these things, the more that we demonize Russia, the more that we send out these smear campaigns to make out that Russia is the only bad thing in the entire world, when actually the West is the demon of the world. And I say that as a man that loves my country and loves the liberties that we have. I don't agree with the Western's philosophy in regards to how we should protect the world, because protecting the world is nothing more than bullying the world into submission and benefiting the people at the top that make these military equipments, that carry on these endless wars, that sacrifice the poorest people in the world. Now, even if Russia was to take Ukraine, what threat would we have as Europe? Do you really think Russia's going to start an all-out nuclear war into Europe because it's taken over Ukraine? I wouldn't say so. I would say that would be drastically stupid. I again think this war could be over. This war could easily be over, but Zelensky rejects it. Zelensky rejects it because he wants Crimea and he wants the Donbass and he doesn't want to give up power and he wants NATO membership. That's why he continuously rejects these peace deals that are thrown at him. And then Putin's never going to Putin is not going to lose this war. I think that's the main argument. Putin is not going to lose this war. He can't lose this war. Number one, his public image would be disastrous if he lost this war. Number two, Russian sovereignty would be at threat if he lost this war. He's not going to lose this war. So the point is, where does it end? Where does it end? I'm not saying give anybody anything. I'm saying keep us out of it. I always call for de-escalation of these things. But where does it end? Does it end when another million Ukrainians are dead? Does it end when Russia has to use nuclear force in Ukraine? Does it end when NATO gets directly involved and we get dragged into an all-out world war with Russia? What is the cut-off point for this war? Or do we just carry it on in the name of democracy and liberty and Western values and continue to bully things like the Middle East, continue to fund things like the Israeli war? Because economically, it's very beneficial for the people producing the ammunition, the technology, the vehicles. It's very good for the asset managers and the stock holders like BlackRock or Vanguard that go into these things. It's very good for the lobbyists that pay directly into our politicians. Where does it end in a humanity point of view compared to a democratic point of view? And I, again, would argue Ukraine isn't even democratic itself, because the actual way that the government was implemented in 2014, not very democratic when we kind of put forward the coup in place, not very democratic when Zelensky refuses to hold any form of election, continues down this path of going, well, we're at war, guys, so we can't do anything. But every time a peace deal is drawn up, he rejects it. He rejects it because it's easier to reject it because it gets him to carry on this war. He stays in power. He gets more money out of this. He gets Ukraine to demand 0.25% of all NATO's countries' budget in their GDP. Where does it end?
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it ends. What I will say is that say obviously whatever about Zelensky. What he is not is a dictator. He cannot hold elections during wartime. He has shown a willingness to participate in peace talks, in working towards peace. I would say that dealing with Donald Trump must be very difficult, and yet he has done it anyway. He does, obviously, as the Ukrainian president, want to take back Ukrainian territory. But that's Ukrainians want Ukrainian territory, Russians want Russian territory. That is a fact of life. That is where people come to negotiations. Ukraine is the only one who has shown willingness to show up to said negotiations. And to go back to an earlier point where you obviously said that NATO, as an organization, spends far more on its military spending than Russia does, which obviously is true. But the reason that Russia poses a threat to Europe is because that its leaders do not consult its people. Its government is not of the people, by the people, for the people. There was no referendum on going to war with Ukraine. Putin does not consult the soldiers that he sends off to die. He lets people out of prison for violent crimes into the battlefield with absolutely no regard for their safety or for, obviously, the safety of the opposite Ukrainian soldiers. That is the reason that Russia poses a threat, is because it is an autocratic nation, which, as right now, shows a willingness to invade others, to reclaim territory that it feels it's lost. That is a threat to Europe. Whether or not, say Russia does win this war, are they going to roll straight into Poland next? Probably not. But having such a puppet state in Ukraine does pose a threat to Poland. it brings Russian military installations closer into Western Europe.
Go on, sorry.
I understand that. I understand the hesitancy. Obviously, that the people there are people who benefit from such a war in monetary terms. People who own factories and military corporations, whatever. And I think the idea of a capitalization on war is pretty abhorrent morally. But I do think that it is a just moral stance to take to fight for Ukraine, to support Ukraine, to take in Ukrainian refugees, because we have empathy. Because if it happened to us, we would want people to come to our aid. We would want somewhere to go if we were being attacked. So if we do not show a willingness to aid other nations, then we risk being left to the dogs if somebody comes to us, whether it is Russia or someone else.
So I'll do an argument, then you can argue back, and then we'll do a closing statement because we've run over an hour and a half by quite a bit. Oopsie. Right. So I'm going to start with oopsie. I'm going to start with this. So you go on about the Poland situation. Number one, Poland's already part of NATO. That's kind of the entire point of NATO's expansion. But also, you made the point, Poland wouldn't want Russian military advancement on its border. That's the entire point about Russia and NATO joining, Ukraine joining NATO. It's the entire point of having NATO military assets on Russia's border. So this is why I'm saying we can always see it from NATO's point of view. We can always see it from the point of view of the West, but we can never see it from the point of view of these other countries. It's the exact same precedent. When you have an enemy at your front door with a loaded shotgun and nuclear scares and stuff like this, because again, we keep antagonizing them in the Black Sea or flying over the Donbass and Crimea Peninsula. When we have these situations unfolding, when we have this level of $1 trillion annually spent on military equipment and whatnot, are we really, really, really that surprised when Russia sees that as a security threat? I mean, again, we can go back and go, yeah, but Poland would see it. Sure, Poland would see it, but Russia still sees it. So I think it's very stupid to try and label this argument as just for one section, but not for the other section. I think that puts into a wavery, unfavorable position. But then also you go on about Zelensky not being a dictator. I mean, I would say the characteristics of a dictator is somebody that unwillingly doesn't want to give up power. I mean, he's made that very clear that he's not going to give in to a peace treaty because simply he wants Crimea, he wants the Donbass, he wants to join NATO, and Russia is not ever going to let that happen because that puts direct threat to their national security. It's kind of like if Syria or Afghanistan decided to start harboring missiles into Scotland, we'd have an issue with that. So when we have a leader that may show up to an actual talk but not be willing to compromise with anything, because in his head, the longer he can keep this going, the more he'll get money-wise. Because at the end of this war, what do you think Zelensky's going to do? He'll resign, he'll leave Ukraine, and he'll go live somewhere else with all the new power and influence and money that he actually has. So when we look at these things, when we look at the influence that the West has on these regions, when we look at Zelensky and we go over what definition of a dictator would be. Now, I think a man that, number one, bans denominations of Christianity within his country. I think, number two, a man that refuses to hold an election, refuses to make a peace deal, and is willing to just continue to allow his countrymen to die. I would say that's probably somebody that's a bit of a dangerous man. I would say that's probably not a sovereign man that's willing to look after his country and put his country first. Because to put your country first, in my eyes regarding Ukraine, give up the Donbass and Crimea, put in harder military force at the border, sign the peace treaty. If Russia breaks it, then it becomes a stronger argument for NATO involvement. But if Russia doesn't break it and they simply keep the new gained regions of land and they keep it like that, what is the actual issue? I don't see that as any issue, because you prevent human beings dying, you prevent the war carrying on, you prevent thousands and thousands of billions of pounds or dollars or whatever going more and more and more into this completely endless war that's going nowhere, because Zelensky fully just refuses to give up these regions. He fully is hanging on to power with any any prospect that he can, because it's easier for him to hang on to power than to give it up. I think we're going to end up at nowhere. We're not going to finish this war. And as you said, I said, how do we end this war? You go, I don't know. Well, no one knows. No one knows because nobody wants to give it up. And I've already gone over the point. Putin is not going to give it up. Putin is not going to lose this war in Ukraine. He cannot lose this war in Ukraine. He's not going to lose this war in Ukraine. That's a done deal from the beginning. So unless we escalate to military involvement with NATO members, unless we escalate to nuclear involvement, there is no foresight end to this war until Zelensky gets off his high horse of allowing citizens to die while he jumps around the world asking for money at all these foreign nations and simply gives up these two regions. Am I saying that Russia's not going to try something after that? No, I'm not. But I'm saying the best solution to an end to this war, to de-escalation, to the preserving of human life, is for Zelensky to give up these regions within Ukraine, for us to cut off funding to Ukraine, cut off support to Ukraine, because all we're doing right now is funding the endless deaths of people. And morally, that's not correct. That's not nationalism. That's not looking after our own people. That's trying to promote the democracy, quote unquote, within this part of Eastern Europe, even though it's not really democracy, is it? Because we overthrew them in 2014. This is an endless war that's going absolutely nowhere.
So yeah, I completely take your point about Poland and having Russian military assets right at their border. They wouldn't want that, but well, that's completely true. Obviously, Russia doesn't want NATO military capability close to its border. NATO doesn't want Russian capabilities, but I think that the difference is that these nations, such as Poland, are committed to freedom and democracy, right? They have varying levels of freedom and democracy in these Eastern European countries, obviously, and Poland has seen democratic backsliding. And yet here we are. Obviously, Putin does see NATO as a threat, but that does not mean, I think, that we should back down on our commitment or our values, because if we do, that sets a precedent that we can do that, and we will just give up on our alliances and our friends. We should continue to support Ukraine. We can still, and we are pushing for negotiation, for peace talks. I think it is, probably if the war is to end, Crimea, probably the Donbass region, the currently occupied regions will not go back to Ukraine. But I think that if we stop now, as America has done in support for Ukraine, it makes us look immeasurably weak on the international stage. It means that we do not care if your country is being invaded, if your people are fighting for their lives. It does not matter. We do not care. We should stand strong in our foreign policy and our commitment to a free and democratic Ukraine, whilst also pushing for negotiation and peace, and trying to minimize the impact on human lives.
Right, we'll do a closing statement. So what I'm going to say is, this is an endless war. It's not going anywhere. Nobody wants it to go anywhere. Why? It's financially beneficial to the big people at the top that make the equipment. It's beneficial for Zelensky to carry on holding on to this power. This war was nothing more than an aggregation from NATO expanding past its original agreement. It expanded all the way into Eastern Europe, and now it's trying to expand into Ukraine. Russia warned for years this was a bad idea. For 20 years, he did not want this to happen. He said, please stop it. Do not do it. It is a security threat to our country. NATO ignored it. We flaunted expansion. We aggravated them with our ships, with our planes, with all of these different things. We aggravated this war, and now we are stuck in an endless war we continue to fund because Ukrainian lives to us apparently mean nothing. That is the big issue. We can argue about democracy, whether or not Russia is a democratic state or Ukraine is a democratic state, all we like. At the end of the day, the people of those countries elected those leaders, and we can talk about Western influence or Western coups or whatnot, but Russia wants Putin. Ukraine apparently wanted Zelensky. Now we have a war. This war is not going to end until Zelensky gives up the land. At the end of the day, Zelensky has to be the one to give up the land. Russia's not going to lose. Russia has nuclear power. It has a stronger military than Ukraine will have. Unless we're heading for all-out nuclear war, this is not going anywhere. NATO is a horrible organization that has completely failed at its original ambitions, its original objectives. It is nothing more than a bully that attacks people it does not like for the benefit of Western influence and democracy, which always makes things worse. We need to get out of this war. We need to stop involving ourselves in foreign conflicts, stop spending billions and billions and billions of pounds and giving our technology and weapons and ammunition and all of this to these countries so they can continue to slaughter each other on the battlefield in thousands. It is dangerous. It is damaging. It's going to seep deeper and deeper and deeper into more conflicts because we're going to continue to spread divide between us and countries like Russia and China. We need to be working on our relations with Russia and China. This kind of foreign policy, this kind of interventionist foreign policy does nothing more than hurt us. We've seen it throughout the entirety of our recent history, be it Afghanistan, be it Iraq, be it Ukraine, be it Syria, X, Y, and Z. Every single time we spend money, we spend finance, we spend technology, ammunition, whatever, it makes it worse. It carries it on. We lose thousands and thousands of people. This is ridiculous. Keep us out of it. Keep us out of foreign wars. Get us out of NATO. Prioritize Britain.
Okay. NATO is not by any means a perfect organization. What it is a group of democratic nations who together decide that they want to defend themselves and each other. The Ukrainian people are obviously under attack. Their homes are being shelled and bombed. It is a horrific tragedy by any means or measure. Us supporting said Ukrainian military, it displays a commitment to our values of liberal democracy, right? And, you know, obviously sending arms and ammunitions to a country at war has a direct effect. It will mean that those arms and ammunitions are used in combat with other human beings. But what we are also doing is we are supporting the Ukrainian government politically. We are also supporting the Ukrainian people by accepting them as refugees into our country so they can live side by side with us as we support their nation in their fight for survival. Ukraine is a much militarily weaker country than Russia. If Ukraine stops fighting, therefore, there is no Ukraine. We should be supporting Ukraine. We should stick to our foreign policy values, because if we do not stick to our foreign policy values, we look immeasurably weak, and we allow other people to, other countries, other peoples to be rolled over by people who are stronger than them.
Is that it?
Yes, I think
very good. No, that's very
my
good.
God, we've been going on this for
Well,
eight.
there you go. That was nearly 2 hours. Oh my lord, Ali, I would like to say thank you.
Oh my God.
I know you quote tweeted
Thank you.
one of my things the other day, and you were like, "This is how you sound." I fear. Well, I hope maybe now you think that I sound a little bit differently, and maybe I sound a little bit more knowledgeable about what I actually believe, and I'm not this grifter, crazy man that everyone likes to make me out to be. But I thank you for taking the time. I appreciate that. That was a good debate. Everyone in the chat, thank you
for having me.
for watching. Of course, thank you very much. Everyone in the chat, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed the different discussions. Clearly, two different aisles of the political spectrum, but the ability to have rational conversation, which is what we need in this country. We need to be able to speak to each other wholeheartedly. But there we go. That was the first ever live debate as well. Maybe many more to come. Maybe many more debates to be had. When I'm not banned from TikTok Live, maybe that would be easier. But yes. But everyone, thank you for watching. Ali, thank you for joining in that conversation. That was very lovely. I'm sure I'll see you on Twitter around. Oh, there's Ali. I'm sure I'll see you on Twitter around. Oh, what a debate. Right. Anyway, I'm going to end the stream. I'm going to end the call. Thank you very much for that. Everyone, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Very good.